We begin with the planned overhaul of Canada's defence industry. The new strategy will cost $6.6 billion. And the goal is to build, partner, buy, meaning build equipment right here in Canada, or when that's not possible, partner with trusted allies to make things together. And only when necessary, Canada will buy equipment outright from other countries. The government is aiming to grant 70% of defence contracts to Canadian firms by 2035. Right now, that number's at 43%. The government says the strategy should help create 125,000 new jobs, as well as increase Canada's defence exports by 50%. Speaking last hour, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre said he's skeptical of this plan.
The reason we can't get things built for our military is the same reason we can't get homes built or resources developed. Too much bureaucracy. The days of having like 15 or 20-year procurement processes, they have to end. We have to move quickly. And that means eliminating all the bureaucracy and empowering our military personnel to make purchases directly of the new technology and equipment that they identify and need.
Industry Minister Mélanie Joly joins me now. Minister, thanks for doing this. Appreciate making the time. 70% of defence contracts to Canadian firms. I wonder, to just sort of set the stage, how do you define a Canadian firm? Like, will the big American companies that are here manufacturing in Ontario, for example, do they count as Canadian in this calculation?
So in the strategy, we're proposing that when basically the content of a given procurement is at 70% made in Canada, that would make then a company a Canadian company. And so that's the idea. But this is a proposal, and we're, of course, working with industry. In the next couple of weeks, we'll be, of course, setting exactly what are the guidelines. But what we're doing in the strategy is, here's what we heard, here's what we're proposing, and we need to make sure that we all agree. But the goal is, fundamentally, we want to give contracts to Canadian companies to have a real Canadian industrial sovereignty. We want to be able to create 125,000 jobs, like you said, and our goal is ultimately to regain a lot of these industrial capabilities that over time, Peter, we actually did invest in. And a lot of our Canadian companies have been very good at exporting. They've actually been able to convince many governments around the world to buy their products. I'm thinking of Diavelin, Bombardier, CAE, I'm thinking obviously of Rochelle, etc. But they have been complaining that they haven't been able to convince the Canadian government and Canadian Armed Forces. And that needs to change. It's an entire culture change that we're coming up with. It's our first defense industrial strategy in recent history. And this is actually to take care of our own.
I want to get to that export capacity issue because the permitting is a really big part of this. But just to circle back to make sure, you talked about CAE and some of these big Canadian companies. When you talk about a Canadian company, are we also talking about General Dynamics, like the American companies that have manufacturing capacity in Canada? Do they count under this calculation?
Well, the idea is for when, for example, GDLS in London or, of course, Bell Textron in Mirabel are building here at home with IP developed in Canada that is actually transferred to our Canadian forces. That's what we're valuing. That's what we want, basically, to support.
And lots of Canadian employment through those. I just wanted to make sure that we were clear on it.
Of course.
The numbers, not just the $6.6 billion being invested here, but the investment that's expected to be drawn in to the industry as a result of this strategy. $180 billion in defense procurement, $290 in defense-related infrastructure, $125 billion in downstream economic activity. That's like $500 billion in investment over 9 years. What makes you think that's doable?
Well, first, of course, we will be investing 2% of our GDP minimum by the end of the year. And then all NATO countries have agreed that it would be 5%. So 3.5% of our GDP in defense and 1.5% in basically dual-use infrastructure. And we need to make sure that we abide by that plan. This is the goal that all NATO countries have set for all European and basically us and the US. And so we know that's the goal. We know that's the objective. now we won't just sit idle and invest in different and companies and just allocate different contracts without thinking that we should use this important investment to really create opportunities here in Canada, because this is happening at a time of very chaotic geopolitics. This is happening at a time of a trade war, and we need to be able to protect jobs in the steel sector, in the aluminum sector, in the auto sector, basically in advanced manufacturing, a sector that has been very much affected by the tariffs. And at the same time, we need to be able to create new jobs. So we think that this strategy is so important, yes, for our Canadian forces, our strong men and women protecting us and keeping the world as a peaceful place. But at the same time, we think that this is something that this industrial strategy can be used as an economic stimulus to help a lot of the sectors that are so key to so many regions of the country.
Getting this done, though, is going to depend on a couple of really key things. And the complaints we heard, we've been waiting for this for a while, and the complaints we heard heading into it were twofold. One, making sure we sorted out, as you mentioned, the export capacity, the permitting that allowed these companies to export these products to other countries that sometimes Canadians, some do, some don't, have issues with. The other, though, was sort of process and government departmental overlap. There's a line that Philippe Lagacé flagged in his Substack post saying, even with more efficient defense procurement, Canadian companies will still need to engage with multiple agencies. Why not sort out that government overlap? It feels in a way like we might just have one new layer of bureaucracy added into the mix here.
I don't agree with that. Actually, we're streamlining the process. And the best example is the submarine deal. The submarine contract of 12 submarines is coming at a pace and, based on a lot of the industrial benefits coming out of this procurement. And basically, it's a pace that we've never seen. It's going fast. We now have 2 proponents, and we hope that we can finalize that deal in the coming months. We now have the Defense Investment Agency, which will be in charge. We have now a new president, we have a Secretary of State for military procurement, and that Defense Investment Agency will be in charge of procurement and will be in charge of making sure that there's no overlap, that things go quicker, that there's less red tape, and that there's actually also better trust between Canadian forces that have real capability needs and at the same time industry that has so much to offer. So that's my first point. To your question regarding exports,
right.
As I mentioned in this interview, we believe that our companies have already a lot of export credentials. They've been around the world. They've seen what other governments have done. And it was finally time for Canada to get on board and make these investments in our own industrial sector and really recreate a defense sector. But of course, we believe also in our policy of human rights, and we'll continue to abide by it. And that is why we know that we can continue to do that, open new markets, because we're now part of the SAFE agreement with Europe, because we're closer also to countries such as Japan and Korea, and because also we believe that our companies have already a lot of experience around the world. So it's basically a win-win.
But I mean, I hear you, and I think a lot of the companies that are listening now will say, well, that's great, but that has not been our experience with your government, with this Liberal government over the last 10 years. And frankly, in governments before them, that export capacity has been hindered, and it has been strung up in red tape time and time again. What specific actions can you and can this government and can these new agencies take to try to make sure that this time, famous last words, are different?
Well, because now we have a defense industrial strategy, period. Your entire question is linked to the plan that the government is presenting, Peter. So, and that's why also so many companies are reacting so positively and the industries are so happy with it, because it's finally based on what we've heard from them. And our own frustration also as a government that things are not going fast enough. And the frustration sometimes also the Canadian forces that they don't have access to what is required to really do their job. So we were able to put everybody together, make sure that we have a really good plan, and finally be able to deliver. And I must say, we didn't wait for the defense industrial strategy to happen. What happened is, meanwhile, we signed a safe agreement with Europe for defense procurement. We were able to invest and do a new partnership with the European Space Agency and invest $500 million to open markets for companies in that sector. We were able to buy 6 new jets from Bombardier. We were able also to open $4 billion of capital through the BDC for small and medium-sized companies across the country that want to enter that important sector, which is defense. So things are being put in place. We're coming up with key procurements: 12 submarines, 15 river-class destroyers, 6 polar icebreakers, a major communication satellite contract, another one regarding ammunitions, another one linked to, of course, fighter jets, and another one regarding training for fighter jets. So a lot of investments, a lot of different procurements. My colleagues, Minister of Defense and the Secretary of State for Defense Procurement, are in charge of this. My job is to make sure that the industry is able to reap the benefits of it, and we're able to create jobs. And that's what we'll do.
Various experts have flagged that sort of the strategy is one thing, but we need a proper defense policy. We need that as legislation. Can you do one without the other? And when can we expect to see more, like something legislatively on the table to move this along?
Well, the Defense Investment Agency legislation is actually in the Budget Implementation Act. So it's important that we stop the obstruction on the part of the Conservatives, and that we are finally able to pass the Budget Implementation Act. It's important. And we need to make sure that we deliver. Canadians have no time for any form of obstruction, and so our goal is to make sure that we're moving ahead at a very fast pace.
All right, Minister, we'll have you back on and talk about this when we get more details as the results come in. So I appreciate making time
With
today.
pleasure. I'll always be there to answer your tough questions.
All right, thank you. Industry Minister
Mélanie
Joly. Prime Minister Mark Carney announced his plan today to overhaul Canada's defense industry. The goal is to build most of Canada's defense needs right here at home instead of buying them elsewhere.
We think that this strategy is so important, yes, for our Canadian forces, our strong men and women protecting us and keeping the world as a peaceful place. But at the same time, we think that this is something that this industrial strategy can be used as an economic stimulus to help a lot of the sectors that are so key to so many regions of the country.
Here for the opposition's take is James Bezan, Conservative national defense critic. James, thanks for coming on. It's nice to see you.
Thanks for having me on the show.
What are your concerns about the strategy, but mostly in its ability to deliver what the industry needs right now?
Look, it's an ambitious plan. We definitely need to have sovereign capability in our defense industry. In times of conflict, everybody's going to be building for themselves, and that includes Canada. Just look at World War II, all that we were able to produce for Canada and our allies. So, what we're looking at here, though, is this plan is just a third defense policy that has been brought forward by these Liberals over the last decade. They have failed to deliver previously. They have allowed over $10 billion to lapse in spending. If you look at the state of disrepair within the military equipment of the Canadian Armed Forces, because of the lack of seriousness and political leadership coming from the Liberals, we have only half of our fleets, whether it's Army, Navy, or aircraft, that are able to be deployed, that are serviceable. That means that the rest of them are sitting around in disrepair, need to be overhauled, need to have proper maintenance done, or worse, they're actually already been pushed to the side and are sitting out in the back getting recycled, or as we know with our Kingston-class maritime patrol vessels, they're just sitting in furlough, all tied together, floating alongside our bases in Halifax and Esquimalt.
I think a lot of Canadians are a little dumbfounded at how we got to that place. And so when I ask, what do you see as the biggest problems with implementation of this strategy, it kind of casts back to what was the implementation problem over all of these years. Is it one thing? Like, what is it that is holding all of this back so effectively when everybody seems to agree it's something we want to do and should do?
Look, I look back and when we had success in Afghanistan under the conservative government, then we were able to go out there in a matter of months, buy and deliver new C-17 aircraft, new Hercules tactical aircraft, 100 new Leopard tanks, replaced our LAV 3s with LAV 6s, and were able to buy Chinook helicopters in a matter of months. It took political leadership, and instead of adding more bureaucracy, which we're seeing in this defense industrial strategy, of having not just another agency run by an individual that doesn't have a military background, other than the only thing in his resume is that he's a former Goldman Sachs banker with Prime Minister Carney. We have another roundtable, another consulting group. The industry has been saying for a decade we need a defense industrial strategy. This strategy is already months behind schedule in its release. So we need to have the political will to go out there and make the hard decisions and buy the equipment that the Canadian Armed Forces needs to do the jobs ahead of them, to protect us here at home, to defend our Arctic, and be a reliable ally around the world.
One of the things that I find interesting in this is, like, we talk a lot about the CAEs and the General Dynamics, the really big industrial players, but there's also these incredible startups that are doing incredible work. What do you see in the industrial strategy that addresses finding balance to make sure we're growing those smaller companies as well as supporting the more institutional ones?
I wish I would have saw more of that in the defense industrial strategy on how we're going to grow those businesses, how we're going to engage in the new technologies. All you have to do is look at Ukraine and how rapidly that war has evolved, the hybrid warfare that's in place, the amount of drones that are being used, and the quantity and the effectiveness of those drones, as well as how quickly they've become out of date. So how do we embrace our entrepreneurs and our small businesses across this country that want to participate? And that means that we need to get the bureaucrats out of the way and let them contact the military directly when possible. And let's test this equipment out. And, we may find the next great gadget and technology out there that could be a game changer in how Canada and the world addresses the wars of tomorrow. Now, you look at the champions, as you alluded to, Peter, that they are actually, the government's going to pick the winners and losers. I don't think that's right. There's some big things that we do that we need government involvement in. National shipbuilding is one of them. And, what we started, 15 years ago was only now producing the warships that we need today. But we need to make sure that those nimble little companies that are out there, that we're going to empower them to produce what will be game changers in the art of war, if it ever comes down to it.
Much of Mark Carney's strategy in this defense strategy, but also in the trade deals that he seems to be signing is in leveraging investment and saying we're going to be able to generate or induce X amount. The numbers that he says they're going to be able to induce an investment in the defense business it's hard, so big it's hard to get your head around. It's like $500 billion all told. Take aside the problems we've had thus far. Do you think that kind of level of investment is actually doable if we get the little things right along the way?
We need to make sure that we have the ability to make those investments. We need to grow our Canadian industry. We need to open up the opportunities for them to be part of bigger global supply chains, including with the Americans and our NATO allies, our Five Eye partners. And but it's going to take a really major effort to make it happen. But that doesn't happen through more bureaucracy. That happens by actually signing contracts. That happens by actually negotiating the right trade agreements and treaties with our allies so that we can more inclusively participate in what so far has been kind of a one-sided discussion. So I think we have to look at where Canada fits in. We know that with our defense industry now, over 50% of what they produce goes to the United States. We know that we're part of some amazing programs already, like the F-35, which has created thousands of jobs across Canada already, and that we're building 3,200 planes, not 88 planes that Canada needs for our Air Force. We get to participate in every F-35 that's out there, $3.3 million on every F-35, 1,250 built so far, another 3,000 on the books, or 2,000 on the books. And we know that, that the next best thing could be a partnership with some of our NATO allies, our Indo-Pacific allies, and that's where you create those high-tech, high-paying, high-value jobs right here in Canada.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there, but as always, appreciate your insight. Thanks for this, James.
Thank you so much.
Conservative National Defence critic James Bezan.